Climate change is rewriting the script for many countries, and Zimbabwe is no exception. In the following report, we look at how people in Chiredzi are coping with the effects of climate change at a time when some of the country's biggest brains are brainstorming on possible mitigation measures.
This community from Chilonga, in Chiredzi, is having the worst nightmare. For the second consecutive year, the rains have shunned the area.
Hakuna chakabuda muminda. Tiri kutotenda government nechirongwa che-social welfare chavari kupa vanhu pa-lean season.
To provide cover, this community invested much in livestock, but that too has become a problem.
Mafuro edu muno mu ward 7 ava mashoma nekuda kwokuti vanhu vakavhura minda mizhinji. Saka tiri kugwa nopatinogona napo kuti varimi vahafure uwandu hwezvipfuwo zvihombe zvakaita semombe vachitenga zvipfuwo zvidiki zvakaita sembudzi. Nokuti muchaona kuti izvozvi tatarisana nedambudziko rokufa kwemombe.
In the face of all challenges, this community had to think outside the box. Mutunzani talks about the orchard's breakthrough.
Leno kahina ka Chilonga leno aingativi kunani kona misinya yemaorenji aendliwa aitiva kunani kona ikumeka kun'wana tiketi ndhawu to hambanahambana mara hi ku rhandza ke GCF itileta hi pfuna kunani kona ku hava misava yi nga endliko.
This is a program under the Green Climate Fund, working with the Agricultural Ministry and UNDP. The Chiredzi community represents the plight of many in the country. Exactly 870 kilometers from Chiredzi in Victoria Falls, stakeholders, including the UNDP, are brainstorming on building a resilient economy in the face of climate change. The Zimbabwe Economic Development Conference is running under the theme Building Resilience and Driving Economic Transformation Under Climate Change. The Finance Ministry Permanent Secretary George Guvamatanga says effects of climate change on many sectors demands that there be a strategy.
Discussions recommended implementation of adaptation strategies complemented by mitigation measures as the country gas emissions are minimal. As part of adoption, government was encouraged to tap its international green finance market to increase fiscal space to cope with the impact of climate change.
Finance Minister Mutuli Ncube remains worried about how climate change has impacted the economy.
Climate change is one of the major threats, as I say, to achieving our vision 2030 of an upper income economy by year 2030. On average, it is estimated that the climate change is eroding about 5% of GDP on the entire African continent.
Agriculture has been hard hit and more than half the population is food insecure. The power outages have increased largely as a result of the low generation of energy at Kariba as a result of low water levels. The two big cities, Harare and Bulawayo, have water crisis as a result of low dam levels. Those are just three areas, but it goes beyond just that. Can the country be resilient at some point? Reporting for ZTN Prime, I am Tafara Sibuchiwe.
We are now joined by Andy Hodges, who is in Victoria Falls for the ZCon, to give us more. It's a very good evening to you, Andy. Now, what were some of the key issues that were discussed at the conference?
Now, when you look at some of the presentations, it looked at climate change, it looked at climate bonds, it looked at the possibilities of Zimbabwe having to change its planting patterns. Right now, for example, areas where their maize is being planted, possibly due to climate change, we may have to change where we plant maize, for example. Maybe we plant wheat, and in fact, we should be targeting crop cultivation in areas where we anticipate, or in the future at least, the climate will affect growing patterns of crops.
Andy, how important was the ZCon conference, particularly from a governance perspective?
But the idea of ZCon 2024, like others, the previous ZCons, is that the meeting or the conference comes up with policy recommendations which are then used by government. In this case, some of the policy recommendations made over the last 3 days will be used by government to formulate the 2025 budget, because it's no longer business as usual or budgeting as usual. For example, because of climate change, you may find that the budget going forward may have to put more money into social protection and social welfare, because of course those are the people, the more vulnerable people are the ones who suffer from climate change, just as they are now with cattle dying around the country, and of course the bad crops and the yields coming out because of El Nino-induced drought.
Andy, so what is your overall assessment of the just ended ZCon conference?
All in all, an incredibly successful conference from my point of view. People were openly discussing issues. There was no holding back. People were putting their minds to try and see what can we propose to government. What can the conference propose to government to make policy? And for only one purpose. The one purpose is to economically uplift the citizens of Zimbabwe.
Konapo, Ipapo pa ZTN Prime, DSTV channel 294, the place to be.